a lot of practices or indigenous practices, which, you know, peoples who worked kind of as guardianships of the land, and their knowledge is super important and is going to become even more important as we kind of go forward. But how do we ensure that that knowledge isn't sort of taken away and then monetized, but also taken away and not given credit? Because of course all these ideas are very fundamental to a culture's identity.
Hi, this is the Ignoramus's Guide to Surviving Humanity. I'm Ileana Chan with my co-host Wei Chan, and we're here with a very special guest, Dr. Anna Sulan Masing.
Hey.
So, how should I call you? Dr. Anna, I'll call you Anna, is that okay?
Yeah, that's great, that's great.
All right, so Anna it seems to be like a Renaissance woman of many hats. You're a writer, a poet, an editor. You've written 2 plays, or maybe more, 2 that I know of that I'm very interested in. You did your PhD on identity and how identity, and please correct me, but my understanding is how identity changes according to environment, with an emphasis on Iban. People who are an indigenous peoples of Sarawak, where my dad is from and my parents live, and Wei's dad is from, and apparently my great-grandmother is of Iban culture or descent. It's very unclear which, but she definitely had the culture part of being Iban. So that's that's kind of interesting. Anything else you want to add to this introduction? That was terribly long and rambly.
Yeah, no, I mean, so yeah, my PhD is looking at how identity changes when space and location changes. So it's looking at migration and the stories we tell when we migrate and move through space. So yeah, so that's the focus, is the kind of like changing space and how that affects the way we communicate and talk and frame our identities, because our identities are shaped by the stories we tell, and we tell stories to form identity.
Yeah, and also a lot of indigenous cultures of Sarawak, and maybe indigenous cultures in general, have oral history traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not just, if we understand storytelling in a really broad sense, it's, we all have our own ways of storytelling, and food is a really key aspect, particularly with migrant communities, of how we carry our stories, our cultural identity stories, which is why I do a lot around food. But dance, theatre, storytelling, is storytelling, and how we create cultures, really, or create cultural identities.
That's so interesting, because yesterday I went to see your installation, Kalab Malam, which means nightclub, I suppose. And it was a really interesting mix of those elements that you're talking about. There was food there, though we couldn't eat it, which seemed very cruel, actually. But it was a multimedia installation type thing, and I wondered if your experience of that installation, do you have anything that you learned on that, or what were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so basically it was a residency with three of us, so 3 Southeast Asian women, basically given a space for 4 days to do whatever we wanted, like at the end of that, what we could have done is just done a Q&A and a chat, or we could have just shown a video. There was literally anything we could have done. We had space, we had time, this is what it was. So what we did was we had a lot of conversations, and we kept things pretty loose and shared a lot of stories, and talked obviously very naturally about food. I mean, all 3 of us have worked with in and around food, so very naturally talked about food, and of course home was the big kind of thing that we spoke about, because all of us can't go home at the moment, and don't really know when we can go home, and those kind of things, and missing family and friends and food, which is the key thing, and the idea of like living online so much. In the last year, that's been really accentuated, and this idea that we can see a lot of things and we can almost know so much about other people through Instagram and social media, and almost have everyday conversations with people but not actually see them and meet them. And again, like with home and family sending pictures of food they're eating or places they're going, and sort of really understanding and like having the memory attached to that sort of photo and its immediacy, but not being able to touch it, not being able to eat it, not being able to really experience home. There's sort of distancing and sort of fragmentation of like memory and current life and world. So it was that was like sort of almost a presentation of all our conversations that we'd had that week. And then this, like also the fact that we then were like, well, part of this experience is also sitting down and eating together. And some of the things we wanted to film about eating, and this, having something on film puts a barrier between us and the audience. But then, of course, we just sat and actually had dinner together and just ordered Deliveroo, which again is like all like picked up takeaway, which again is such a big part of like, this last year of delivery food. So that kind of experience was also fun. And then just like we're like sitting there eating and sort of deciding to put lights on and the camera on and just see what happens, and that was, so it was a real just a showing of our conversations, I think. And yeah, the distancing, like the idea is that, almost at the end of it, people, feel hungry or want to eat, but you can't. And that hopefully it was quite a joyful experience, because it was sort of a lot of sharing and like a dinner party, but without the food. But that idea, I think, is very important, of the distancing, when you are a migrant as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The community of food. Yeah. Also, I really did like the karaoke aspect of that.
Yeah, I was very unsure whether anyone would actually. I didn't think anyone would do karaoke like at all. I thought everyone would be like, "Ah, ha, ha, good joke." Okay, that's
quite a few people did.
Loads of people were like, "All right."
Yeah, not me. But yes, it was fun.
But it's a real like I don't know, like Malaysian party or Iban party, where you have the karaoke being taken very seriously in one corner, where the party is happening and there's music and sound everywhere else as well. Like if you look at the the Iban longhouse, which then has a veranda up front that connects kind of all the apartments. And when you have a party, one end you'll have karaoke, in the middle somewhere we'll have someone, doing traditional music and dance, and the other end might be like a proper kind of disco going on, and you make your way around and down, and there'll be food and drink in between, and then you kind of go back to the top and sort of, so it felt a lot like that. It felt like a longhouse party.
So for you, because you're multicultural background, so what is home to you? What do you consider home?
I mean, I guess that's sort of a complicated question in some ways, and also in other ways it's not. I mean, I just little homes, and the idea of sort of home is a, like, it depends how you look at home. Like home and it's sort of nostalgia and a sense of comfort or things like that. Then home is a concept of longing, so it's wherever you're sort of not. If you're someone like kind of on the move or thinking along those lines. But then there's also, home is exactly where you are, and this idea of kind of the agency and the movement and being still, and kind of like a stillness and kind of constantly, on the move. London's the place I've lived the most of my life, so I would say that without a doubt that I'm a Londoner, and that would probably be my sort of core identity. And that being said, I think London's as an identity, I think London is one of stable fluctuation and people from everywhere.
And also, you're writing a book called Sourced, right? Which is about. Oh no! Oh my gosh! What?
No, I have a project called Sourced.
I thought it was a book, but it's actually a research project.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it came out of the idea of wanting to write a book, and something that I'm pursuing anyway, and sort of formulating. And hopefully it'll become a book. But yeah, it came out of the idea of this is what I wanted to pursue. These topics of looking at how ingredients are sourced and how those kind of identities of ingredients travel. So like looking at what my PhD was, but like through sort of very specifically food and ingredients, and because that way we can kind of tap into the history of things. But as we were creating it, it was something very much me and Chloe, who I do sourced with, wanted to explore together. And quite like, actually last night was a very kind of good idea of sort of the idea of how we wanted to explore some of these really big topics through kind of interaction, speaking and presenting and events. But of course that was like a ruminating idea before pandemic, and then events were fast very quickly. But then when we really rethought about it, and sort of the kind of like big idea of what we wanted to do with this is that it was a research project. And if we're really going to understand this topic in a really big way, it actually needed to have multiple voices. And the only way to do that is to sort of commission people to do research and whatnot. So actually, Chloe and I do very little writing for Source. We commission a lot of people to do the research and writing. And but for us, what it means is that we have to do a lot of background research. We have to investigate kind of what sort of broader topics are, so that we know how to pitch, we know how to edit. We can, like people write, when you're an editor, people write stuff that you have no experience about, but you have to kind of understand the landscape, or like understand the kind of strength that you want from that article or those kind of topics. So it's when we really believe in the idea of that academia it should be accessible, and that we learn in different ways. So we have the idea of like academic writing should sit beside video and film, and we have a comic strip. And we have published in, different publishing in different languages. So we do have a Malay piece written in Malay. So, for example, and this is funny.
So what sort of things do you commission? Do you choose to commission? Have you chosen to commission?
We work on we concentrate on an ingredient a season. We try to do 4 seasons this year, which was actually too much. I think we are going to do just about 4 seasons, but it's actually too much research. So next year it'll just be 3 seasons. So at the moment we're in cinnamon. So quite a lot of stuff that we commission, and people pitch in some story ideas. But last season was water, and actually part of water we looked at migration, because the idea of like traveling overseas is a water.
Well, yeah, and so how much of that project is also sort of like the politics of, I guess, water, or when you said water, I thought of like drought and refugees, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. We did talk about water rights a little bit. Definitely. I mean, I would say that it's quite. But political is a difficult one, because once you say things are political, it becomes sort of polarizing, or the idea of taking a side, or like a political party as opposed to policy. So I would say that definitely it's political, in the sense that what we want to do is look at structures and systems, and 100% wanting to look at systems. And I guess systems have politics and policy involved in it. So I would say that's the most important thing for us, is to relook at systems, rethink them, rebuild them, burn the whole fucking house down, start again.
So how would you rebuild the system surrounding water?
Surrounding water, I mean, in the sense that, like, so if you think about, America's probably a really good example of how with water, colonial structures and systems have been put in place that take away rights from Indigenous people, or from people in general. I don't know the full details, but there are stories in the US about like land that come with land rights and water pipes and that kind of stuff, that is looking at the idea of land rights, really, or like that things belong to someone, which is an absolutely, which is a colonial concept. So I think that rebuilding the system would be not to have a capitalist colonial system.
That is really fascinating, I think, when it comes to the US, because you're right, there's the indigenous rights issue, but then there's also the issue that I think over 40 states don't have safe water. It's like there's
Yeah,
lead in their pipes. And that, again, is to do with capitalism and corruption within the system.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so the system isn't working, or rather, the system is working exactly as it was meant to work, which is to create inequality. And yeah, so either way you look at it, that's not the system I want to be working.
Yeah. So was there anything that you learned from last season about water specifically that
Yeah,
helped you decide what system we should be trying to invest in?
but that's the thing. There isn't a system, and there is no, and then we need to move away from binary ideas of the fix or the solution or the um, and rather kind of like, I don't know, de-invest or and rethink how people play a part in these systems and situations. I guess the biggest thing that I learned was about bogs and how bogs are the kind of how they are part of the ecosystem and balance out water and carbon dioxide and yeah, bogs are our most precious and ancient natural systems that we need to protect and are not being protected. So that would be one start. Don't buy compost that has peat in it, and
Oh,
actively protest against and encourage for bogs to be left. And also waterlands and stuff, which we have globally, right? Bogs, we have them all over the place.
Oh,
okay.
I was asking Anna about like what she misses about Sarawak and things like that. So
I mean,
it'd be nice to.
the food for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, breakfast, breakfast. um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's the smells and the heat and
I hate the heat.
oh, I love
You don't like the heat? I don't know. I like it. It depends. The forest is great.
mm. Yeah,
That's like, I feel like whenever I get too hot in Malaysia, I just think, well, it didn't used to be kind of all these flat grassy places. It used to be just full of trees. And when
mm,
you go, into the forest, you just feel so comfortable. It's just exactly the right temperature. And you can really imagine how people just live without fans and air cons because it's totally like, it's really
different.
comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, yeah, where my parents live, they live close to a secondary jungle,
Mm.
and it is actually very comfortable. Um, but yeah, it's when I get out of the airport that I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
yeah, I love that though, because
Mhm.
it's like a physical barrier,
It
and
is.
that's like a notification. Your body is like,
Yes,
okay, I'm here. I need to, adjust a physical kind of encompassing, yeah, thing, which I
it
really like.
really is. The sliding door, and then it opens out, and then you walk through, and it's like you hit this wall of heat, and
Yeah,
it's amazing. And then the smell comes in as well, and you're just like, oh yeah, I remember this.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've got to say the food is the thing I miss the most. I can't like, yeah. There is
Yeah.
nothing, and like Malaysian food here is pretty good, and it's like I think we're lucky we've got a few places to eat, but it's not obviously it's not the same. Yeah,
Yeah. I haven't even found any yet. Yeah, I haven't even found any places yet, Malaysian food. But yeah, but it's not the same because you'll have like in Malaysia a hawker stall that's
Hmm.
been making one dish for like generations.
Yeah, specialized.
You
Yeah.
can't really replicate that sort of thing. And then the
no,
ingredients as well.
yeah, absolutely, and it's also just like this eating laksa at 8 a.m. in the morning when it's about to get really hot, but it feels a little bit cool, and you're sweating eating it, but it's still
Hmm.
kind of just like a morning breeze, and yeah, like that is just the best.
Yeah, it's the whole experience, isn't it? And the food is like perfectly adapted to make you feel a certain way in those conditions. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also like in Malaysia, I mean, I obviously only go back when I'm either doing research or it's like a holiday. And so it's kind of not real life for me. So, which is probably the same as, but and with that has like Malaysia has a slower pace anyway, or Sarawak has a slower pace anyway, and then adding into the reasons why I'm there that need to be kind of like honed down or very specific, it's not like me trying to juggle a bunch of stuff, which is what reality is, every day is. So then your whole body kind of goes into a like, okay, relax and yeah, it's good.
It is slower. I remember my dad was saying that. I don't know. I can't remember which uncle it was, so I don't get to incriminate him. But he said he goes into the office at like 9:30, then at maybe 11, he goes to the coffee shop for some breakfast or something like that. Then he comes back, and then like an hour or two later, he'll go to the coffee shop again for lunch. And I think it was like all about just going between the office and the coffee shop. And I wonder how much work he actually gets done. Or maybe he's very efficient. Maybe he works very intensely. Who knows?
But that's the thing. Like maybe, we have this idea of work being having to slog at it. But like you have one clear agenda and you do it. Spend all the other time in the coffee shop.
Yeah. They've got the secret. They definitely got the secret.
Exactly.
They know things.
I mean, it's hard to do that during lockdown. It's the only thing, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it's. I mean, lockdown in this year has totally changed routines, or and what we think of as being normal was normal, and trying to regain some kind of sense of I don't know. Familiarity with your routines, I guess. It's a tough one.
Yeah, for sure.
You talk about issues like migration and water and things like that, and also the relationship we have, the so-called first world has with the global south and countries in the global south. Do you feel like there is an interconnectedness between, when we use the term global south, do you feel like there is an interconnectedness between the situations of various countries in Asia and say South America or Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the concept of the global south and the global north is also, if we should look at it in terms of global south spaces can exist in the location of the global north, as well as global north spaces can exist in this sort of southern hemisphere, and so to speak, that kind of hemisphere, southern hemisphere is not correct, but that hemisphere of the global south, because that's looking at it in terms of like positions of power, and it's very much based on a post-colonial spaces and states. And so understanding how those spaces in the global south have been framed, or like have been framed for how they work and how they're good for the global north, right? Like what makes them a good state, what makes
oh my god,
and like interesting for a global perspective isn't actually what might be inherently something that they value, or peoples within that state might value, right? But we as the sort of global economy, and the economy is what dictates kind of like national identities. Those states get positioned as why they're good is because of the way that they get to why the goodness for the global north. So there is absolutely interconnectivity. And I think food pathways is a really good way of looking at that. This is something that Dr. Jessica B. Harris talks about a lot, and her book High on the Hog, and also the Netflix show High on the Hog, I would say is a really great reference point to look at the idea of how food pathways are ways that we can track and look at the sort of way the global south as kind of a whole, and like looking at a collective is not making something what's the word?
Homogeneous. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's looking at the concepts and the collectiveness of that. And so tracking those sort of pathways, we get to see where knowledge and traveling of information has happened. And I think that's also another way of looking at and seeing agency and power and knowledge be transferred, and probably was never valued, or has not been valued, because it doesn't sort of, it's not a it doesn't produce kind of economy. But then it did produce economy. It created the rice fields in the US, and it created all that kind of stuff. But like the sort of understanding kind of like knowledge that was brought by individuals and communities, and sort of valuing that kind of knowledge as opposed to valuing the product of the knowledge. Does that make sense? It was slightly rambling.
I'm still trying to.
I'm trying to process. Oh, sorry. Just for to recap, the Netflix show you were talking about was called
High on the Hog.
High on the Hog. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I did see that one. Yeah, and that's kind of. I saw it. I started it. I didn't know it was going to be that deep. I thought it was just going to be another food show. So actually, it's kind of more about how food summarize it, but how the flow of food and the flow of knowledge kind of I guess tells a story about inequality. Would that be fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously it looks very much at the Black American story, which is obviously incredibly important, and placing value on that knowledge. And it's without it, I mean, everyone I'm sure has their own opinion of it, but for me it was a really great way of placing value on a collective people's knowledge, without and addressing how that knowledge made white people very rich.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's that kind of like a little bit more of a like a very tangible example of cultural appropriation, I guess.
Yeah. And obviously it talks about enslavement, and it talks about it in a very by through these food pathways. It really opens up the conversation and addresses it, I think, in a really important way. And also because it is Black food creators and by Stephen Satterfield, who is incredible in all ways, shapes and forms. So
amazing.
It's really interesting to me, like you're talking about this, and I don't know if I completely grasped what you were saying. This is probably completely out of left field then, but it made me think of just how there's been so many instances of, like, say, American companies patenting like rice or or whatever it is, and then like turning around to Thailand and trying to make them pay for the use of, I guess, the specific rice that they've patented. And so this idea of, I guess, that's the thing about food and rice. It's something like we think of, just as like a capitalistic consumer thing, but then who owns that? Who gets to own that? And also, this idea of the patent and the intellectual IP, the intellectual property of food, is just really fascinating to me. I'm thinking of also this Chinese the inventor of the hybrid rice, I think, that was like famine resistant or whatever. And like he's like a hero in China because he shared this technology for free to help eradicate poverty across the world. But it's just a very different philosophy from what we would get from the West, which is that's our IP, we get to keep it. So yeah, I think that's like a very fascinating idea, because even with something simple like rice, it brings up so much, like you're saying, with the pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really huge question, and one of the things that I think is really an important one to be asking going forward as well, because as we sort of talk about climate change and how we're going to kind of solve the problems of the world, a lot of practices or indigenous practices, which, you know, peoples who worked kind of as guardianships of the land, and their knowledge is super important and is going to become even more important as we kind of go forward. But how do we ensure that that knowledge isn't sort of taken away and then monetized, but also taken away and not given credit? Because of course all these ideas are very fundamental to a culture's identity and how they live, and to sort of just take that away and, you know, like patent it or do whatever, you know, and say, I've got the answer, this is it, listen to me, and become the expert. And, you know, it's very I think is going to happen. And
maybe even prevent the original culture from actually
utilizing it and then charging them for
themselves, or charging them for it,
penalizing
or preventing them from making money out of it globally, you know, all the benefits that could go to that original culture, just
exactly
completely
And that's really the real issue with cultural appropriation. Like, we've gotten to a point in culture where we've just sort of desanitized. We've just sort of like rendered cultural appropriation to what sort of outfit you wear, versus like this very serious theft, you know, which is really I think the main issue with cultural appropriation.
And can just impoverish, you know, communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this season, you're working on cinnamon. And what stories or what things have you learned about cinnamon?
There are over 250 types of cinnamon.
No.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
I thought there were like, I think I know 3.
I didn't know that there was more than one, to be honest. There are 3 types of cinnamon.
No.
Or 250.
The 250.
What were the 3 that you knew?
I think this was just bullshit, but I think it was like to do with like there's Indian cinnamon. So maybe I just know cinnamon from
that doesn't sound right. I'm sorry. What, Indian cinnamon, Chinese cinnamon, and Moroccan cinnamon?
I didn't even know.
I mean, to be honest, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's what most people think. So there's like Ceylon cinnamon, which is considered the true cinnamon, which was named after the colonial name of Sri Lanka. So the cinnamon that's grown in Sri Lanka, which is considered by most people kind of true cinnamon, and it's sort of a lot softer and sort of higher quality. And then there's cassia, which is known as Chinese cinnamon, but is actually used a lot in India. So a lot of the Indian cooking uses cassia. So those are the 2 that most people know. And so I kind of see those 2 as like fraternal twins that sort of go through life together, and people mix them up, but they're not identical, but they kind of like, occupy the same space. And I think predominantly those are the 2 that throughout history have been the sort of predominant ones. But there are lots of different types of cinnamon. And the trees are used in different ways depending on what type of cinnamon you have. And but I didn't know how many there were. I kind of had an idea, but I had no idea. I honestly thought there were basically 2 and then variants on that too. But no.
Are they like, do they taste very different?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is like, as I said, like they use different cultures use the it's from the laurel tree, so family use it differently. So like the Taiwanese cinnamon, from my understanding, is predominantly the leaves are predominantly used as opposed to the bark.
Wow. What do you do with leaf cinnamon? What do you do with cinnamon leaves?
I mean, lots of different things. I mean, you can sort of treat it like a bay leaf. And
yeah,
some
I'm
people,
kind of imagining that. Like
some people actually use some cinnamon and call it like Indian bay leaves, and it's actually cinnamon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just getting really hungry from this conversation.
I know. Actually, did you have an article about someone growing Taiwanese cinnamon, which is a really lovely little story. So read that. It's very short. It's very sweet. yeah, so that's a good little insight into Taiwanese cinnamon.
Did you learn anything apart from sort of the different, how many different varieties of cinnamon there are? Did you sort of learn any interesting stories from your study of cinnamon?
So cinnamon has like a really, it's a very ancient spice, I would say. So it's got lots of really good stories from antiquity. You know, people trying to, where cinnamon was from was the biggest story that everyone wanted to uncover, which the cinnamon traders made up stories so that no one could find it. And one of them being that like there were cinnamon birds that created cinnamon and cinnamon. So,
that's cool. I mean, I kind of like that. So
yeah.
Cinnamon birds.
Yeah. But yeah, cinnamon, like the ancient Egypts used cinnamon from embalming. The Romans burnt it sort of at funerals and things like that. So yeah, I mean,
like,
yeah,
it's like incense.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite a different thing.
Oh god!
Right. Yeah. Let's
Don't
not
edit
go
that out. You got to keep that in.
Okay. What about medical properties of cinnamon? I'm sure there must be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of loath to go into that kind of detail unless I know someone who does do it. You know, like who that's their kind of cultural traditional thing, and so I haven't gone down that road, and we haven't actually commissioned anything from that. The problem with that is that sometimes people get very mystical about like kind of like Eastern healing properties, and then we branch into like it's like cultural appropriation and stuff that doesn't get spoken about, you know. And the other thing is like we only like there's only so much we can commission. So if we're going to commission something that's around the medical properties, it's around that kind of stuff, I would like to investigate that a lot deeper. And there's only so many stories we can do and have the sort of right like rigor behind it, you know. So I haven't delved into that side of it.
I mean, all these things like water that we're talking about, it could be, I mean, that could be years long.
Absolutely.
Commissioning. So it's really and
yeah.
same with cinnamon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you decide on cinnamon for this season too?
I think cinnamon's a really fascinating spice because I think it's really because it's had such a long history, and yet this idea that sort of the cinnamon that people harked after and wanted so desperately only came from this one place, you know, from Sri Lanka. So the idea of how did Sri Lanka become part of this global trade? Did it become part of this global trade, or was the cinnamon that was in Sri Lanka that was discovered by the Portuguese something that wasn't known before? Or, you know, that whole idea of you know, what is the truth of cinnamon is fascinating in itself. And I think cinnamon represents, by trying to seek the sort of truth and storytelling, cinnamon kind of represents a lot of other, you know, issues with storytelling and history, but also because of its kind of like, for me it seems to be the one spice, or the one of you know, a key spice that has such wild stories attached to it. So why do we create all these wild stories about cinnamon, you know, and why has it captured people's imagination? And if you start talking about cinnamon to lots of people, everyone has their own cinnamon story that's related to their history, sort of really wherever you are in, you know, in the world. I mean, well, not everywhere, but you know, there are cinnamon has traveled far and wide and is sort of embedded itself into a lot of cultures, which I think is really fascinating.
Did any one story really stick in your mind or stand out for you?
Yeah, there's this woman whose like 4-year-old daughter is a bit of a wild card when it comes to what she wants to eat, and so she was coming up with all these like ways that she wanted to have her cinnamon cooked, and like she was, you know, telling her mom like, oh, we're going to put this and then have cinnamon. I can't remember the top of my head, but I have got it. It's in one of our sourced newsletters, actually. It's really funny. And so she was like, we're going to have this and we're going to put cinnamon in it. And she's like, that's not sound good. And she tried it. Like,
you can't just do that to everything.
Yeah, but no, her daughter came up with this like these great recipes with like wild kind of recipes with cinnamon, and so that's cool. I like that idea. And then that's like, creating new stories, which is a really nice thing.
Yeah, it's true. I can think of like every single cuisine that I can think of has some sort of like East or West, or I can think of has cinnamon.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm just super hungry again.
I know.
Thinking all of the food I could be eating. So does this mean that you're like an amazing cook yourself?
No.
No. You just know about where the food
but like, I don't know. Like, I'm a nerd. I'm an academic. I like the structures and the investigation of the food. I can cook fine, but I would prefer to be reading than cooking. Cooking takes time and energy and labor, and the people are better and have more patience. So, I don't know. I like theory. I like that kind of investigation, I guess. And I mean, I can cook. I understand the concepts of flavors, but I get distracted and burn my onions all the time.
Did I, on a slightly different topic, did I see some of your work in a batik exhibition?
Yes.
Yes. So that was at the dry cleaners in Dalston. Yeah, the steam room. That was a really beautiful exhibition, and people are talking about kind of what batik means to them. Is that a hobby that you have, or is it just something that you picked up for that particular exhibition?
Last year, I wrote a piece about sarongs and my sarongs, which are all batik designed. I mean, my sarongs are like an everyday part of my life. I mean, you saw all of them last night on the floor.
Oh, okay. They're beautiful.
So as a bit of a joke, I mean, I don't know if you saw the picture of my dog and my cat on the batik exhibition.
No. Oh.
No.
So that was the story. Well, I submitted a story about myself, but they also submitted the story of the relationship my dog and my cat have with sarongs. So.
I mean, my family is Chinese from Sarawak, but I think we still use sarongs a lot. So my dad actually, not recently so much, but definitely for a very long time, would just wear a sarong around the house. And you have it's interesting because in Malaysia you have the different style of prints for men and women. So a man would have like a more linear pattern on the sarong, and a woman would have more of a floral pattern. And it's funny when you see kind of people around England not knowing that and just wearing a sarong for not that it's that important anymore, but wrong gender, I guess. And then you have you use a sarong to, I guess, cradle a baby. So my cousin would always, I mean, she's probably like 30 now, but when she was a baby, I would see her kind of in a kind of a sling, held up by hammock, held up by like a bungee cord, and then you rock the baby by like pulling the thing, and it just looks so relaxing. So and of course I see my grandma and my granddad in sarongs all day in the kampong. So
but sarongs are like used for everything. They're kind of like automatic picnic blankets when you're out, like like they're I don't know, I just love them because they're so versatile, and then once they go through the sort of use of wearing, and then when they're kind of threadbare, then you can use them for like as a cleaning cloth as they break down. Like the life of a sarong is long and varies.
Oh wow, okay, I never thought of that. So yeah, because that was the next thing I was going to ask, is if you use it for so many things, then why do they put such nice patterns on them if you're just going to do that with them? But I guess you wear a new sarong for when you want to be smart or something like that, and then obviously when it's not new anymore, then you use it to swaddle the baby or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing that you do have, I mean, you have so many projects really, but it's the cheese mag, which is very different from what we were just talking about, but how did that come about? Because it's a really beautiful magazine.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It came about because in lockdown, my boyfriend was trying to find a cheese magazine to subscribe to, and he couldn't find one. So that's why it exists. Very drunkenly decided that that's what we're going to do. So we did that. But also, it isn't actually at all different from everything I do when you really look at it. It's taking an ingredient or an idea and looking at its place in culture and community and how people relate to it. So it's about place and people, and we just happen to talk about people and location through cheese. And cheese is a really great example because it's a real artisanal practice now in a lot of places, obviously. But not only that, like if you look at the history of cheese, you know, it was something that was created, it probably was created accidentally, but also it's something that was used for the leftovers, right? Like, what do you do with the leftover milk? How do you keep the milk? How do you age so you have this protein going forward? You know, it's a real and so then different cultures and communities played around and created different cheeses, and that represents the terroir and the environment that they're living in, because cheese gets created when done by hand and artisan, which is, you know, how you would do an artisanal cheese. The literal hand that makes it is putting in the flavor and developing it. The air around the cheese, which is, you know, representative of the soil, the grass, the environment, is part of the aging process. The grass that the cows eat, like cheese is so representative of place and of people. And then again, it travels, you know, you buy it in other places, it goes to the next town, it can go overseas, it can, you know, like the idea of what cheese is and what it becomes is really exciting, I think.
Oh, can you talk a little bit more about how it was created by accident?
Yeah, I just basically just JB was trying to find a cheese magazine, and there isn't one in the English language. Like really, I want someone to come in. There's one called Culture, the magazine of culture or something like that in the US, but there isn't a magazine called Cheese Magazine.
No, I meant like how cheese might have been
invented. So not my drunken Twitter conversation.
I thought that was pretty clear, and I think that was amazing and clear and bolt of inspiration.
So no, well, so still that most of the world is kind of lactose intolerant to a certain extent. So it's kind of, cheese is kind of a weird one. So we couldn't eat milk. Humans, we broadly couldn't process milk. So and except for babies, so babies were given milk, and then when you become an adult, you become lactose intolerant. So in a way, that was something that was being wasted. And so cheese came about when like, God, I have no words at the moment. Like vessels.
Yeah, vessels. Yes. I was like amphora. I don't know. I was gonna say, I was like amphora. That's a very grand word. Yeah. Like vessels. Weird, yes. Good.
Weird names. And I'm like, just a vessel. Something to keep something in. So once kind of like pottery and ceramics and stuff were being made, and so people were like, okay, putting the milk in there for whatever reason. Maybe it went into cooking, but maybe it probably was just being used to, I don't know, feed the animals or the babies or things like that. But basically being put into ceramics vessels and being left, and then it curdling, and then you can weigh and that kind of stuff. So that's probably how it would have happened. I mean, obviously we don't know, but that it would have, it came about the same time as kind of vessels, whatever form, were being created. So that there was a place to hold this liquid, for this liquid to sour, to get to a point that the I don't know, mechanicals of it, the structure changes so that more humans were able to tolerate the
lactose.
Oh, yeah. So wait, now I remember. So cheese is less lactosey than milk. So people with lactose intolerance can tolerate cheese more than they can milk.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So then with the people who were creating all the cheese, you know, like just with evolution became less lactose intolerant than, so, you know, the northern parts of the world, Northern Europe rather. Yeah. But I think still like the majority of the world, I think, is still actually lactose intolerant. Like, I think if you were to gather all the peoples in the world, that's
Yeah, I find it. I'm surprised that I've never noticed any problems, because I was reading something on just Wikipedia, which I don't know, who knows, that the place, yeah. And it was saying that 90% of people of East Asian origin are lactose intolerant. And I was thinking, I've actually never noticed anything, but I've never really tried to drink a big pint of milk. I don't know, that's, but yeah,
I
I've
don't say
never noticed
intolerance is
anything.
intolerance is a spectrum, right? And if you don't eat it, the more intolerant you become. So if you have it little bits every day, you know, you sort of body can handle it a bit. But if you, there's a really interesting newsletter. Alicia Kennedy writes an incredible newsletter every week, and I haven't caught up on this one, but I do know, I've briefly looked through it. But she's done one on milk, and like oat milk and soy milk, they're ancient. Like, they're not some new fandangle thing. You know? So you know, the idea of drinking milk or like, you know, protein rich liquids that are not lactose is a really common practice or you know, thing.
I mean, obviously I knew about soy milk, but I didn't know oat milk was ancient.
Yeah, like, don't, yeah, read her newsletter for the details, because I'm butchering the
It's fine to butcher things, it's just a podcast, so.
Yeah.
It's not citable.
Yeah, I imagine if it was.
Yeah.
You're also a poet and a playwright as well.
Yeah, I mean, both of those are sort of, I guess, accidental in some ways. I mean, my background is all in theatre and dance and movement.
Wow.
So that was what
Amazing.
my PhD sat in, so to speak. And the poetry thing ended up being what was the best way for me to communicate the research that I was doing, because so much of it is not exploring kind of blurred lines, or like not looking at the binary and really understanding, you know, things in a much more kind of I don't know, intuitive way. And I thought poetry was the best way to do that. And also a lot of the storytelling that I was researching was Iban poetry, really. So like the Pantuan, which is, yeah. And so that was the best way, I thought, for me to kind of understand and express those kind of things. So yeah, yeah, that was accidental. And then I've published a bunch of stuff, poems, and get commissioned to do poetry. And I still find it is the best kind of way of exploring quite complicated details. And yeah, and then, well, as I said, you know, my undergraduate was in performing arts, my PhD was in performing arts. So I had a theatre company for 7 years. Didn't write a lot of stuff, but I wrote bits and pieces. And yeah, I guess the main piece was my PhD piece, and a piece that I've been working on for a few years called Don't Sing in the Kitchen. But and there's been a few other bits and pieces, and I guess like stuff like Last Night is very much, you know, sits within my wheelhouse of how to tell stories. And yeah.
What's Don't Sing in the Kitchen about? Is it bad luck?
Yeah, don't sing in the kitchen or you'll marry an old man.
Oh my God.
So yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true, or if it's just something that the performer who I work with, who I created it with, she was like, I don't know if it's true, or if it was just something I got told to shut me up. So and I'd be like, you know, like,
unless you're good at singing, and then it's fine.
No, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so yeah, she I just thought that was really funny, and also just the idea of kind of elders telling you, like, that's really important, like not to
Mm-hmm.
marry an old man, or like to marry, or that marrying is such an important thing.
Yeah, or that presumably this is aimed at women because a woman would be in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
That's really funny.
yeah.
So you sort of evolved from being a performer to a writer to telling your own story, or was that always how you approached performing arts?
I think I was a performer originally, but very quickly realized in my degree that I didn't want to be a performer, although performed all the way through. Anyway, and then got to my PhD and realized I had to perform again because it was the only way I was going to do stuff, and kind of got grumpy about that, but did it anyway. I mean, I think looking back now, I think the reason I went into theatre, well, I mean, I knew this at the time, but was that I wanted to tell stories, and this felt like a really accessible way, or a very important way. And I don't think I realized it at the time. Obviously not like why or how that was, but ritual and ceremony is a big part of many cultures, and that's where theatre comes from. And so that idea of telling your own cultural story how theatre evolved.
Right.
So yeah,
I guess that brings us back to the oral tradition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With the Iban poetry you looked at, was that contemporary or was that a tradition?
I mean, it's a tradition for sure, but it is contemporary because it gets made up on the spot, so it is contemporary. So it's stuff that people, they basically rap on the spot about what's going on in the world as they address a politician, or they address people within a ceremony, or it's super cool. I mean, I don't know how they do it. It's pretty intense, but yeah.
Is there anything that is coming up? You just did your amazing exhibition. Is there anything that you're working towards, or that we should look out for?
I'm hosting a summit this week, actually, which is, I think it's free, and it's really, really interesting, and it's online as well as in person, and it's looking at how technology works with community and around sustainability.
Wow.
And really interrogating whether tech is a good thing or not. So it's London Tech Week this week. So that should be really cool. It's called Concave. So on Instagram, it's just Concave Summit. But there's some really great talks in that that I think, and some really important people having some really great discussions. So I'm hosting that on Thursday.
So what brought you to that?
Someone reached out to me, the person organizing it, to say, to come on board. So I've helped a little bit behind the scenes, although I've been really busy, so I haven't done as much as I could, but sort of organized a couple of the talks and then hosting it. But yeah, since so much of what I do is community-based and about sustainability, she thought it'd be interesting to sort of look at those things with the food element on board. But yeah, but I mean, in general, everyone should buy Cheese Magazine, and everyone should sign up to Sourced, because that is the only way that I get to commission people. Like I don't pay myself for those projects. I make sure that I pay other people. So the more people sign up and to Sourced, the more I can pay our contributors, which is for me the most important thing. And yeah, same with Cheese Magazine.
Amazing. Do that. Everybody do that.
Issue 2 of Cheese Magazine will be out in the next couple of months.
Oh, cool.
Exciting. Okay. Link in bio.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for your time.
Yeah, welcome. Well, thanks for thinking of inviting me. That was fun. And sorry, I'm a little slow today and a bit bleary-eyed, but yeah.
You did not seem so.
No, that we didn't notice. If this is bleary-eyed Anna, then
oh my gosh.
What is bright-eyed Anna? Yeah.
The Ignoramus's Guide to Surviving Humanity is available as a podcast on Spotify and Amazon Music.
You can also like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. And if you want to help us grow, then you can become a patron on Patreon. And that's it, right? I think that's it.
Yeah.